The day had started like any other, but from the moment the individual opened their eyes, there was already a heavy feeling in their chest. It was the same pressure that had slowly grown over the last few months, the feeling that life was moving too fast, too loudly, with too many expectations pulling from every direction. Even before their feet touched the ground, they already felt tired. They sat on the edge of the bed for a moment, trying to gather themselves. The room was quiet, but their mind was already noisy, filled with thoughts about deadlines, unfinished tasks, unanswered messages, and all the small responsibilities waiting the moment they stepped outside. It had become a habit waking up and immediately feeling behind. Nothing terrible was happening in their life. Yet everything felt heavy in a way that was hard to explain to anyone. They got dressed, made a quick cup of tea, and stared out the window while waiting for it to cool. The world outside looked peaceful, but that peace rarely reached them anymore. People walked to work, cars moved along the road, someone across the street watered plants on a small balcony. Everything looked normal, maybe even calm. Still, inside, there was a steady storm of thoughts that never seemed to settle. The individual had not always been this stressed. In fact, they used to enjoy mornings. They would often wake up early, stretch, breathe fresh air, and enjoy the stillness before the day began. But lately, stress had taken that space away. Even small tasks felt bigger than they were. Even simple conversations drained energy. Every noise felt sharper, louder, more distracting. It wasn't that life had turned bad. It was more like life had become too full. Work only added to the pressure. The office was always busy, always filled with movement and chatter. People walked in and out, phones rang non-stop, and computers clicked endlessly. On some days, it felt like trying to work in the middle of a crowded train station. The individual would often sit at their desk wondering how everyone else seemed to handle the noise so easily. Why did their mind get tired so fast? Why did their chests feel tight even when nothing major was happening? They tried to hide it, of course. No one wants to admit they're overwhelmed by normal life. So every day, they smiled, nodded, worked hard, answered questions, solved problems, and tried not to show that their head felt too full. They told themselves they just needed more rest, or maybe a vacation. But even on quiet weekends, the feeling never fully left. On that particular morning, the tension felt especially strong. Their desk was stacked with papers, emails kept coming in, one after another, and even the sound of people talking nearby made it hard to focus. They tried to work through it, but their thoughts kept scattering. They would start something, then freeze for a moment, then try again. It felt like their mind was running in too many directions at once. Around midday, they stepped outside for a short break. The air was cool, the sky was clear, and for a moment they closed their eyes and tried to take a long breath. But the calm they were hoping for didn't come. Instead, their mind continued running through all the tasks waiting for them inside. The individual shook their head gently, almost as if trying to shake off the noise. But nothing changed. The rest of the day followed the same tiring rhythm. By evening, they were exhausted in a way that didn't match the amount of work they had done. It was the kind of exhaustion that sits deep inside a tired mind, not a tired body. When they finally returned home, they dropped their bag on the nearest chair and sat on the sofa with a long sigh. Grateful for a moment of silence, but even silence felt loud now. It was one of the strange things they had noticed. Silence no longer brought peace. It only made them more aware of the thoughts spinning in their head. They leaned back, closed their eyes, and wished they could find something, anything, that would help calm the constant noise. After a few minutes, they reached for their phone, not really knowing what they were looking for. Maybe a relaxing video. Maybe some guided breathing. Maybe something soft to listen to. They scrolled through different suggestions, most of which they had already tried before. Some helped for a few minutes, some not at all. Then they saw a simple title: Classical Music for Relaxation. There was nothing unusual about it. And they had heard classical music before, but for some reason this small video caught their attention. Maybe it was the calm picture on the thumbnail. Maybe it was because they had already tried everything else. Without thinking too much, they tapped on it. The first sound that came through the speakers was a soft piano note. It was gentle, almost like a whisper, followed by another note that felt warm and slow. The individual didn't expect much. They were used to background music that didn't make any real difference. But within the first few seconds, something felt different. The notes moved slowly. It's almost as if they were trying not to disturb anything. The melody was simple, but comforting. It felt like a warm blanket slowly spreading across a cold room. The individual leaned back, letting the sound fill the space around them. For the first time in a long while, their breathing softened. Their shoulders relaxed without them even noticing. They listened quietly, almost surprised by their own reaction. The music wasn't doing anything dramatic. It wasn't loud or emotional. Instead, it was gentle in a way that reminded them of soft rainfall or distant waves, steady, calm, and soothing. The more they listened, the more their minds slowed down. Thoughts that had been racing non-stop began to settle like dust floating to the ground. Minutes passed. Then more minutes, but they didn't feel the need to check the time. For once, they didn't feel the weight of everything waiting for them tomorrow. They didn't feel guilty for resting. They didn't feel like they were falling behind. They simply existed in the moment, breathing softly, letting the music hold their attention without taking any effort. They stayed like that for almost an hour, without noticing how long it had been. When the video finally ended, they blinked slowly, almost as if waking up from a dream. The room still looked the same, but something inside felt lighter. The tension in their chest had loosened. The pressure in their head had softened. It wasn't a big change, but it was real. They sat there quietly, thinking about what had just happened. Why had this music felt so different from everything else they had tried? Why did something so simple have such a strong effect? They didn't know, but they felt grateful for it. It was the first moment of true calm they had experienced in weeks, before going to bed. They played another piece from the same playlist. This one had soft strings, slow and warm, almost like a gentle embrace. Again, the same peaceful feeling returned. Their breathing slowed again. Their thoughts softened again. It reminded them of something they had forgotten, that peace didn't always come from big changes. Sometimes it came from small things that touched the heart quietly. That night, they fell asleep faster than usual. There were no long minutes of staring at the ceiling, no heavy thinking about tomorrow, no restless turning from side to side. They simply drifted into sleep, carried by the soft echo of the music still lingering in their mind. The next morning, the noise in their head didn't magically disappear. But there was a small shift, something gentle, something hopeful. For the first time in a long time, they woke up without feeling immediately overwhelmed. They remembered the music from the night before and pressed play again while getting ready. The soft notes filled the room, and the day began with ease instead of chaos. On the way to work, they wondered why they hadn't tried classical music earlier. It felt odd that something so old, so simple, could bring such comfort. But maybe that was the beauty of it. The music didn't ask anything. It didn't demand attention, didn't push energy, didn't try to impress. It simply existed, offering peace without expectation. Throughout the day, the individual found themselves thinking about the sounds they had heard the night before. They didn't mention it to anyone, but inside there was a quiet curiosity. Could this become a small escape for them? Something they could return to anytime their mind felt too full? That evening they played classical music again, just to see if the feeling would return. And it did. Slowly, calmly, and with a sense of warmth that felt almost surprising. For the first time in a very long time, the individual felt like they had discovered a small doorway to peace. It wasn't a perfect solution, and it wouldn't fix everything. But it was something real, something gentle that they could hold on to in the middle of all the noise. And maybe they thought this was the beginning of finding their way back to themselves. The next few days moved slowly, but in a calmer way than before. The individual still woke up with thoughts waiting at the door of their mind, ready to rush in, but the feeling was softer now. It was as if the music had created a small cushion between them and their stress. When they turned on the classical playlist again in the morning, the same gentle notes filled the room, and once more, they felt a quiet shift inside, a little more room to breathe. They didn't fully understand why the music felt so comforting. It wasn't dramatic or powerful. It wasn't the kind of music that tried to make you feel something big. Instead, it moved slowly, patiently, in a way that didn't demand anything. The notes rose and fell like calm waves, almost like the ocean breathing. And each time they listened, their minds softened, even just a little. One evening, after a long day, they sat on the sofa and closed their eyes while another soft piano piece played. The melody felt warm, like a gentle voice telling them everything would be all right. They let their thoughts wander without fighting them. Slowly, those thoughts grew quieter, as if the music was brushing away the noise. They hadn't felt this kind of peace in months, maybe even years. They remembered how, before life became so busy, they used to enjoy small moments of quiet, like watching the sunset, taking thoughtful walks, reading books with no rush. But over time, responsibilities had piled up, and those moments faded away. The music felt like a door back to those lost moments, a reminder that peace was still possible, even in the middle of a busy life. As days passed, they began listening to classical music not just in the evening but throughout the day. When cooking dinner, they played soft violin pieces that made the kitchen feel warmer. When writing emails, they let slow piano melodies fill the background, helping them stay steady instead of tense. Even while cleaning, they kept the playlist running, finding comfort in the simple harmony of sound. The change was subtle, but it was real. Tasks that normally stressed them felt a little lighter. The noise in their mind didn't go away completely, but it settled more easily. They found themselves breathing deeper, thinking clearer, and moving through the day with more patience. One afternoon, after finishing a long list of tasks, they sat at their desk and stared out the window. The sky was soft gray, and small clouds drifted slowly, as if they too were following the rhythm of the peaceful music playing in the background. Something about that moment felt different. They weren't thinking about work, or tomorrow, or the long list of things waiting at home. Instead, they were just there, live in the moment, quietly breathing. They realized how long it had been since they felt present like this. For so long, their mind had been jumping between past worries and future pressures, never settling long enough to simply exist. But now, with the music flowing through the room, they finally felt grounded. Later that evening, they made a warm drink and sat near the window, letting the music guide their thoughts. The melody was slow and delicate, like soft footsteps on a quiet path. The individual closed their eyes and listened carefully, feeling each note settled gently inside them. It was the first time they truly listened, not just as background sound, but as something meaningful. They noticed how certain notes lingered a little longer, how the piano seemed to speak without words, how the spaces between the notes were just as peaceful as the notes themselves. It was a simple experience, but it touched them deeply. For the first time, they wondered who had composed this music. What were they feeling when they wrote it? Were they searching for peace too? This curiosity slowly grew over the next few days. They began reading short descriptions under the music videos, learning small stories behind the pieces. Some were written hundreds of years ago. Some were created by people who had lived difficult lives but found comfort in sound. It struck the individual how human it felt, this sense of people across time trying to express emotions without speaking. One night, they read about a composer who said music was the place where he found peace when the world was too loud. That sentence stayed with them for a long time. It felt familiar. It felt like the exact thing they were searching for. The individual thought about how everyone carries hidden struggles. People walk around with smiles but hide storms inside their minds. And yet, music, something so simple and universal, had the power to reach those hidden parts, offering comfort without asking for anything in return. It made them see the world differently. It made them feel less alone. Another day at work, the usual noise didn't bother them as much. Conversations buzzed around the office. Keyboards clicked constantly. Phones rang one after another. But instead of feeling pulled apart by the noise, they felt steady. They kept a pair of small earphones in their pocket, and during their break, played a calming cello piece. Within minutes, their minds softened again, and the tension eased from their shoulders. It amazed them how quickly the music could shift their thoughts. They began to think of it as a small, safe space, a place they could enter whenever the world felt heavy, whether at home, at work, or on the bus. They could simply press play and let the sound reshape the moment. One evening, after a particularly long day, they stood in the kitchen preparing dinner. Their body felt tired, but the moment the first notes of a gentle orchestral piece filled the room, something inside relaxed. They moved slowly, chopping vegetables, stirring the pot, letting the music guide their pace. It felt almost like cooking with a quiet friend sitting nearby, offering comfort without words, as they ate alone at the small dining table. The music continued softly in the background. They noticed how much calmer their heart felt. The meal tasted simple but good, and they didn't rush through it like they usually did. Instead, they took their time, letting the music fill the space around them. After dinner, sat on the sofa and thought about how much their life had changed in just a short time. Not dramatically, no big events, no major breakthroughs, but the way they experienced daily moments had shifted. They no longer felt trapped inside their own thoughts. They no longer felt the constant weight of stress crushing every quiet moment. Music hadn't solved everything, of course. There were still responsibilities, still tasks, still difficult days. But now there was something strong and steady to hold on to. Something that helped them breathe. Something that reminded them that peace was possible. One particular night, as they were getting ready for bed, they played a simple piano piece with slow, airy notes. It felt almost like a lullaby, gentle and warm. They lay down and closed their eyes, listening closely. The notes floated softly in the air, one after another, each one settling deeper into their mind. Their breath slowed, their shoulders softened, and their thoughts loosened their grip as they drifted into sleep. A quiet realization formed inside them. They were beginning to trust the music. They were letting it guide them to a calmer place. It was becoming a part of their life, not just something they listened to, but something that helped them find balance again. The next morning, the world outside looked the same as always, cars passing, people hurrying, the usual rush. But something inside felt different, softer, steadier. They made a warm drink, opened the curtains, and let the morning light spill into the room. As they pressed play on the playlist again, gentle strings filled the air. They stood by the window, sipping slowly, watching the world move without feeling overwhelmed by it. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. It felt like they were learning how to live again, not just survive the days. And so day by day, the role of classical music in their life grew deeper. It had started as an accident, just a video they clicked on out of curiosity. But now, it was something healing, something real, something they could feel in their chest and mind. Something that brought peace where there was once only noise. It was still the beginning of their journey. But already they were starting to understand just how powerful one small moment of calm could be. And as they listened to the soft piano notes drifting through the air, they knew this was no longer just sound. It was becoming a quiet companion, leading them toward a life with more peace, more focus, and more space to breathe. The days that followed carried a different feeling. Almost like a new rhythm had quietly entered the individual's life. They didn't announce it to anyone, and no one around them knew what had changed. But inside, something had shifted. Life was still busy, responsibilities were still there, and the world still demanded the same level of effort. But now, there was a sense of balance forming. A small but steady calmness that grew stronger each day. Classical music had become part of their routine, without them even planning it. It was no longer something they listened to only at night. It had slowly blended into every corner of their day. When they woke up in the morning, they would play a soft piano piece to allow themselves to adjust to the day. While preparing breakfast, they let gentle strings guide their thoughts. Even during their commute, when the world around them felt loud and rushed, they kept the music playing quietly inside their earphones, giving their minds something steady to hold on to at work. The difference was noticeable, but only to them. Others still moved around with the same energy as always, but the individual felt less pulled by their surroundings. Instead of reacting to every sound, every conversation, or every sudden problem, they found themselves pausing first, breathing, and thinking with more clarity. The music had taught them something without words. Calmness is not the absence of noise, but the ability to stay grounded even within it. One day at work, a situation came up that would normally have overwhelmed them. Several tasks were needed urgently, and everyone seemed stressed about it. People were walking quickly between desks, phones were ringing more than usual, and conversations overlapped loudly. The old version of them would have felt frozen inside, unsure of how to begin. But this time, something different happened. They put on their earphones for a moment, listening to a slow violin melody that flowed like a calm river. They closed their eyes gently and took one deep breath. When they opened them again, the pressure was still there, but it no longer felt like it was crushing them. They broke down the tasks one by one, working steadily, keeping their mind anchored by the music. Even though others around them were tense, they stayed focused. And by the end of the afternoon, everything was done. As they leaned back in their chair after finishing the final task, they realized something important. The music wasn't just helping them relax, it was helping them concentrate. It had become a tool, something that supported both their mind and their heart. It gave them peace, yes, but it also helped them stay present, sharp, and focused. It was as though the melody was guiding their thoughts gently into order, allowing them to move through the day with more ease. This is helping me in ways I didn't expect. They thought to themselves that evening while walking home. The sky was darkening, and the air carried a quiet chill. They kept their earphones in, listening to a warm piano song that made each step feel lighter. They noticed how their breathing matched the slow rhythm of the music, how their chest felt more open than usual, and how the world around them didn't feel as overwhelming as it normally did. When they reached home, they placed their bag in its usual spot and sat down in the living room. It had become a habit to take a moment just to breathe before doing anything else. They played another slow piece, letting the calmness fill the room. The sound made the entire space feel softer, as if the walls themselves were breathing with them. They realized how much they had been missing these quiet moments. They had been living for so long without giving themselves permission to pause. Even when they started cooking dinner, music stayed on. The rhythm of chopping vegetables, stirring the pan, moving around the kitchen blended naturally with the gentle notes playing in the air. It didn't feel like multitasking. It felt like everything was working together in a steady, slow harmony. Later that week, they decided to take a short walk in the evening, a simple habit they had once enjoyed but lost somewhere along the way. The streets were calm, with only a few people passing by. The sky above was covered with soft clouds, and a cool breeze moved through the trees. They played a peaceful orchestral piece that flowed like wind across a quiet field. As they walked, their thoughts settled deeper than before. They realized how different their days felt compared to a month ago. The stress was still part of life, but it no longer controlled them. Their mind felt more open, more steady. Their focus had improved, something they didn't expect from listening to music. There were moments when they forgot they were listening because the sound blended so naturally into their day, almost becoming a quiet companion walking beside them. During the walk, they thought about how many people live their lives without realizing how much noise they carried inside. People often believed that stress was normal, that a tired mind was simply part of adulthood. But maybe it didn't have to be. Maybe even small, gentle habits could bring people back to themselves. Maybe peace didn't come from escaping life, but from learning how to move calmly through it. One night, while sitting on their bed, they scrolled through different playlists, curious about how many kinds of classical music there were. Some were lively, some dramatic, some soft like floating feathers. They found themselves drawn to pieces that felt like stories, music that carried emotions quietly, without forcing them. They listened to one song that began with a single slow note, then slowly layered into soft chords that sounded like gentle rain. As they listened, the room felt warmer, as though the music itself was shining a soft light. A thought came to them then: what if they could rebuild parts of their life around peace instead of pressure? What if they slowly created more moments of calm, more space to breathe, more small habits that supported their mind? They didn't need big changes or perfect routines, just small things that helped them feel human again. They began making small adjustments. They woke up 15 minutes earlier, giving themselves time to sit quietly with a warm drink and soft music before the day began. They started organizing their tasks into smaller steps so they wouldn't feel overwhelmed. They reminded themselves that it was okay to pause, okay to rest, okay to breathe deeply when life felt too heavy. At work, they no longer rushed through everything. Instead, they took a moment before starting something important, grounding themselves with the calmness they had learned from the music. Others around them noticed something was different, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet sense of steadiness. The individual didn't seek attention, but people could see the change in how they moved, how they responded, and how they seemed more present. One coworker asked them one day, "You seem more at ease lately. How do you stay so calm with everything going on?" The individual simply smiled, unsure how to explain it without sounding unusual. They didn't mention the music right away, not because they were hiding it, but because it felt personal, like something special they had discovered for themselves. But later that day, they thought about how many people might also need moments of peace. Maybe one day they would share their experience. Another evening, they sat at the dining table with a notebook, something they hadn't touched in months. They wanted to write down how they were feeling, not as a task, but as a quiet expression. With the soft sound of a cello piece in the background, they wrote simple sentences. "I feel calmer. I feel like I'm breathing again. I didn't expect something so simple to help me so much. I want to keep this feeling." The words felt true. They weren't trying to be poetic or deep. They were simply honest. And as they wrote, they felt grateful not just for the music, but for the chance to find themselves again in small moments of calm. Across the next few weeks, this new rhythm grew stronger. The music wasn't just sound anymore. It was part of their environment, part of their movements, part of their thoughts. It guided them without controlling them. It reminded them to be gentle with themselves, even on difficult days. There were still stressful mornings and tiring evenings. There were still responsibilities and unexpected challenges. But the difference was clear. The individual no longer felt like they were drowning in their own thoughts. They carried a quiet anchor within them, a sense of peace that stayed even when life became noisy. On one particular evening, after finishing all their responsibilities, they sat by the window with the lights low. The music playing was soft and steady, almost like the heartbeat of the night. As they listened, they realized something beautiful. They were beginning to enjoy life again, not in a big, dramatic way, but in small human ways. In the warmth of quiet moments. In the beauty of simple sounds. In the gentle rise and fall of notes that carried emotions across time. In the simple act of breathing deeply. This was not just music anymore. It was healing. It was connection. It was a companion that had helped them step back into themselves slowly, softly and without force. And they knew now, more than ever, that this journey was just beginning as the journey continued. The gentle rhythm of classical music had become a part of his everyday life. What began as a simple habit, putting on a calming track to relax, had now turned into something much deeper. It felt like the music was slowly rebuilding him from the inside. Each soft note, each rising melody, each soothing harmony seemed to open a little more space in his heart, like a window letting in a warm breeze after a long winter. He had never imagined that sound alone could shift a person's emotions so deeply. In the past, he thought of music as something that played in the background while people worked or traveled or passed time. But now he understood that certain music didn't stay in the background at all. It became a companion, guide, even a quiet healer. Some afternoons, he would sit by the window with a cup of warm tea and let the melodies wash over him. He didn't rush the experience. He didn't try to multitask. He simply listened, feeling each moment stretch softly and peacefully. One evening, he walked to a nearby park right after sunset. The sky was painted in soft shades of pink and gold, and a cool breeze carried the smell of wet grass. He sat on a wooden bench beneath a large tree whose leaves moved, gently as if keeping time with the quiet song playing in his earphones. He had discovered a new classical track earlier that day, one filled with gentle piano keys and a slow, comforting build. As he listened, the world around him seemed to slow down. People walked by, some laughing, some talking, some lost in their own thoughts, but none of it disturbed him. Instead, everything felt connected. It's like he was witnessing life from a peaceful distance. For the past few weeks, he had carried a small journal in his bag. At first, he didn't know what to write, so he simply jotted down how each piece of music made him feel. But over time, the journal became a quiet space for him to express things he hadn't said aloud in years. On that park bench, as the last bit of sunlight faded, he opened the journal and wrote about gratitude, something he had forgotten to feel for a long time. He wrote about how music had slowly helped him find clarity, and how it had taught him to appreciate small things again: a warm drink, a slow breath, a peaceful moment alone, the sound of leaves moving in the wind. He realized that relaxing classical music wasn't about escaping life. It was about reconnecting with it in a softer way. It helped him look at his emotions with patience instead of fear. Some days he still felt heavy inside, but the music gave him space to breathe through it. On days when he felt overwhelmed, he reminded himself to play the melodies that felt like sunlight. And somehow, those simple choices started to shape his days into something calmer, something more grounded. Back at home that night, he placed his phone on the table, sat comfortably on a floor cushion, and dimmed the lights. He pressed play on a playlist he had slowly built, songs he trusted, songs that always brought him back to himself. As the soft strings began, he closed his eyes. Suddenly, he felt like he was floating in a quiet world made of sound alone. There was no stress, no noise from the outside world, no expectations. Just music and breath. He remembered moments from his childhood when everything felt simple. He remembered lying on the rooftop of his old house during warm nights, looking at the stars and feeling that life was much bigger than his worries. It felt similar now, as if the music was reminding him of that old innocence he once carried. A small smile moved across his face. It had been a long time since he felt that kind of gentle joy. The next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. The air was cool and the sun had just started rising. Instead of scrolling through his phone or rushing into the day, he decided to play a classical track with soft violin and piano. The moment the music began, he felt a wave of calmness settle inside him. It set the tone for the entire morning. He moved slowly, not lazily, but intentionally. He prepared breakfast with a quiet mind, noticing things he had ignored before: the sound of water boiling, the soft aroma of toast, the light filtering through the curtains. As he sat at the table, he realized something important. Peace didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was something you had to make space for, something you had to choose a little bit every day. And music, especially calm classical music, was helping him make that space. Later that day, he visited a small bookstore near his home. It was a quiet place with wooden shelves and the soft smell of old pages. As he explored the aisles, he noticed something: his mind was still peaceful. Even in a new environment with people moving around him, he didn't feel the usual tension he used to carry. It was as if the music had left an imprint on him that stayed even after the songs ended. He found himself drawn to books about mindfulness, creativity, and inner peace. He picked one up and read a few lines that spoke about slowing down, about embracing simple joys, about reconnecting with yourself. It felt like the book was describing his own journey. He bought it and walked home with a quiet excitement. When he reached home, instead of turning on the TV or checking his messages, he played a soft piano track, opened the book, and began reading. The experience felt so gentle and grounding, like the perfect combination of two peaceful worlds: words and music working together to calm his mind. As days passed, he started forming small routines that made his life feel lighter. Before sleeping, he made it a habit to play calming classical music. Sometimes he fell asleep before the track even ended. Other nights, the melodies guided him into a soft, deep rest. Mornings became quieter and more meaningful. Afternoons felt smoother. Even stressful situations didn't shake him the way they used to. Music had become a daily reminder that peace was always available if he chose to look for it. One day, he received a call from an old friend who had noticed the change in his tone lately. The friend asked how he had been managing stress so well. He laughed softly and said, "Honestly, I just listen. Really listen." The friend didn't understand at first. So he explained how classical music had become a gentle companion on his path, toward inner calm. The friend was surprised, but curious, and by the end of the call, he promised to try it too. Later, he stepped outside onto his balcony with a cup of warm tea. A gentle breeze brushed against his face. He leaned on the railing, looked at the street below, and felt grateful. Not because everything in life was perfect, but because he was learning how to meet life with a softer heart. Calmness didn't mean that problems disappeared. It meant that he was finding strength to face them without. Breaking down inside, as the evening sky turned from blue to a deep shade of purple, he played a gentle cello track that echoed softly in the quiet air. The notes rose and fell like waves. For a moment, he closed his eyes and let the music surround him. It felt like standing in a warm shower after a long day, comforting, soothing, and renewing. He didn't know what the future held, but he wasn't worried the way he used to be. He now understood that peace wasn't a destination. It was something you learned to return to again and again. And classical music was becoming his pathway, guiding him back every time he drifted away. That night, before going to sleep, he opened his journal again. He wrote about how life had changed slowly, almost quietly, in the background of soft melodies. He wrote about how music taught him patience, how it helped him breathe through difficulty, how it reminded him that gentle moments mattered. He wrote about gratitude, not for big achievements, but for small things: morning sunlight, evening breezes, a warm drink, or a single peaceful minute in a busy day. When he finished writing, he placed the journal on his bedside table and took a slow breath. The room was dark except for the soft glow of a small lamp. He played a peaceful song, the kind that starts with a quiet piano line, rising only slightly like a whisper. As he listened, he felt a soft warmth spreading in his chest, a sense of comfort that words couldn't fully describe. He closed his eyes, letting the music guide him into rest. He didn't think about tomorrow. He didn't think about the past. In that moment, all he felt was calmness, as if his heart was being wrapped in a soft blanket of sound. He slept peacefully, knowing that tomorrow would begin with the same gentle rhythm, the same quiet promise that calmness was always within reach. As long as he kept listening, in the weeks that followed, his journey with relaxing classical music grew even deeper. What started as a way to calm his mind had slowly become a part of who he was becoming. Each day felt smoother, each thought felt clearer, and his heart felt more open than it had been in years. It was as if the music was teaching him how to live slowly in a world that often moved too fast. One morning, he woke up before sunrise, something he rarely did in the past. He stepped outside onto his balcony, where the air was cool and still. The streets were quiet, and a faint orange glow touched the sky. Everything felt calm, untouched, and peaceful. He pressed play on a soft classical track, one with gentle piano notes that felt like tiny drops of warm light. As the music filled his ears, he felt a quiet happiness settle inside him. He leaned against the railing, taking a long breath. He didn't need to rush. He didn't need to worry. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was not fighting with life. He was simply living it. Later that day, he decided to take a long walk through the city. Instead of choosing busy streets, he followed a small path that led through an older part of town. It was filled with narrow roads, small shops, old buildings with cracked paint, trees that had probably stood there for decades. It felt peaceful in its own unique way. It's like a place that had witnessed countless stories. He kept his earphones in, letting the soft music guide him. People passed by, some carrying bags, some smiling, some lost in thought. He didn't know their stories, but the music made him feel connected to them somehow. Even strangers felt familiar when viewed through the calmness in his heart. After walking for a while, he reached a small lake at the edge of the neighborhood. The water was still, reflecting the sky like a smooth mirror. A few birds flew low over the water, creating gentle ripples that expanded slowly and disappeared. He sat on a bench near the lake and listened to a classical piece with soft strings and a warm melody. As it played, he felt like the world around him was breathing with him. He watched the water, the trees, the sky, and the slow movement of everything. It was peaceful in a way he couldn't put into words. He felt present, fully present, not thinking about yesterday, not worrying about tomorrow. After sitting for a long time, he took out his journal. The pages were filling quickly these days. There was something comforting about writing his thoughts down, even if no one else would ever read them. He wrote about the lake, the sky, the music, and the quiet feeling inside him. He wrote about how much he had changed and how surprised he was by this transformation. He wrote about how peaceful moments didn't always come on their own. You had to make space for them, as he wrote. Gentle realization formed in his mind. Peace was not an escape from life. Peace was a part of life that people often forgot to nurture. The music continued softly, blending with the natural sounds around him. It felt like everything: the lake, the breeze, the soft footsteps of people walking nearby was part of the melody. When he finally stood up to leave, he felt lighter, not because anything big had happened, but because he had allowed himself to slow down and simply exist in the moment. On his way home, something small but meaningful happened. An elderly man was trying to lift a heavy bag onto a shop counter. Without thinking, he stepped forward and offered help. The man smiled warmly and thanked him. The moment lasted only a few seconds, but it left him with a quiet joy. He realized that calmness didn't just make life easier for him, it made him more open to others. It made him kinder, more patient, and more willing to see the goodness in everyday life. That night, he played a calm, slow classical track while making dinner. The melody floated around the room, turning an ordinary moment into something peaceful. He cooked slowly, enjoying the simple motions, cutting vegetables, stirring a pot, arranging things neatly on the counter. He felt grateful for the soft glow of the kitchen lights, the smell of warm food, the quiet rhythm of the evening. When he sat down to eat, he didn't rush through the meal like he used to. He took small bites and enjoyed each flavor. He listened to the music and felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. After dinner, he stepped outside again. The night air was cool, and the stars peeked through the dark sky. He leaned on the balcony railing and let the music play softly. It felt like the entire world had slowed down just for him. He didn't need anything grand or dramatic. These small, peaceful moments were enough. The next few days followed a similar rhythm. Every morning began with gentle music that helped set the tone for the day. Every night ended with melodies that softened his thoughts and eased him into rest. He noticed he was sleeping better, waking up with more energy, and moving through the day with a calm confidence he didn't have before. One weekend, he decided to visit a small cultural center that offered free music sessions. He didn't know what to expect, but something inside him wanted to explore the experience. When he walked in, the room was quiet, except for a single musician playing a classical melody on a piano. The sound filled the room like warm light. People sat on cushions on the floor, listening with closed eyes or soft smiles. He found a spot in the corner and closed his eyes too. As the music flowed around him, time seemed to dissolve. There was no rush, no noise, no stress, just sound and emotion. The musician played slowly, each note falling gently, as if speaking directly to the hearts of the listeners. He felt tears in his eyes, not out of sadness, but because the music touched something deep inside him. It reminded him of moments in his life he had forgotten, emotions he had buried, and dreams he thought were too small to matter. But in that room, with that soft melody, everything felt meaningful again. After the session ended, he approached the musician and thanked him. The musician smiled quietly, nodding in understanding, as if he had heard similar words from many others. Music had that effect; it reached people in ways regular words often couldn't. On his walk back home, he felt like he was moving through a softer world. Even the city noise didn't bother him as it normally would. He hummed the melody softly to himself, and each step felt light. As days turned into weeks, friends and family began noticing the change in him. Some said his voice sounded calmer. Others said his face looked more relaxed. A few even mentioned that he seemed happier overall. When they asked what changed, he simply said, "I started really listening to music." At first, they didn't understand how something so simple could make such a big difference. But he explained how classical music helped him breathe through stress, think more clearly, and feel more connected to himself. A few of them became curious and asked for his playlist, which he happily shared. One friend later told him that the playlist helped her sleep better after long, tiring days. Another said it helped him stay calm during work. Hearing this made him smile. It felt good knowing that something that brought him peace was now bringing peace to others too. One afternoon, he returned to the lake, the same peaceful place where he had once written in his journal. The water reflected the sky beautifully that day, with soft clouds floating like gentle brushstrokes. He sat on the same bench and listened to a slow, warm violin piece. As he watched the reflections on the water dance gently in the breeze, he thought back to how this journey started. He remembered the tired nights, the stressful mornings, the restless thoughts, and he remembered how different life felt now. He wasn't perfect. He still had challenges and worries, but he handled them differently. He approached life with a quiet strength, a softness, patience he had never known before. He realized something important in that moment. Calmness was not just about music. It was about choosing peace even when life felt messy. It was about slowing down when everything around him felt fast. It was about breathing deeply when his mind tried to run away with worries. Music had simply opened the door. He had walked the path himself. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes, feeling the music blend with the gentle sounds of nature around him. In that moment, he felt whole, present, calm, and quietly joyful. As the sun began to set, he stood up and took a slow walk around the lake. The world felt peaceful. His heart felt steady. His steps felt light. When he finally reached home, he played one last soft classical track before going to bed. The gentle melody filled the room like a warm embrace. He lay down, closed his eyes, and let the music guide his breath. The world outside faded into a soft blur before drifting into sleep. One gentle thought settled in his mind. Life would always have its challenges, but as long as he kept a peaceful melody in his heart, he would always find his way back to calmness. And with that comforting thought, he slept deeply, surrounded by the quiet beauty of sound.